All right. Welcome everybody to Autodesk Virtual Academy this morning. I'm Nigel Mbaye, application engineer and customer success manager here at KETIV Technologies. Today we've got good friend Justin here with us. Justin, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Nigel? Glad to be here.
Doing good, doing good. Nice to see you're in front of your mansion there, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Looks like it's not raining where you are. It is here in good old Southern California. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the session today. Today, we're going to be going over something in iLogic. Specifically, we're going to go over something called configuration modeling, um, which Justin will go over a little bit of exactly what that means, what that actually pertains. But let me go ahead and give you some of the reasons of why we're doing this. First off, uh, at a time like now when a lot of us are working from home and maybe we can't be as efficient as possible, we want to simplify and speed up the design and manufacturing process as much as possible, right? We want to be able to get the most yield. One of the ways you can speed up that design process is to automate a large portion of it. And so if your designs are configurable, and Justin will tell you exactly what that means, right? If it lends itself to things like some automation themselves, if your products are similar enough to each other, then it makes sense to go ahead and utilize some of the techniques Justin will show today. So iLogic is the automation that you can utilize within Inventor to do a bunch of tasks, whether it's modeling, whether it's things like drawing automation, so on and so forth. You can use things like iLogic or the Inventor API to go ahead and do things like that. Those are things that Justin does on a regular basis. He'll probably give you a little bit of background on what he does here on the team as well. And go over some of that other stuff. Justin, do you have anything to add before we get into it?
No, if I'm going too fast or you guys have any questions, feel free to put them down. Nigel will tell me when to stop or go faster. Just let us know.
Sounds good. Let's go ahead and get squared away. Justin, go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Okay. So hope everyone's doing well, staying safe out there. Today, let's go over a little bit configuration modeling using iLogic. Like Nigel said, my name is Justin Gao, and I'm an application engineer here at KETIV. So shout out to Tigerflow, specifically Eric at Tigerflow for suggesting today's topic on iLogic. If anyone watching AVA would like to see any future topics or see something covered in AVA, go ahead and fill out the survey at the end of the session, and there is a special comment area where you could recommend topics and ideas. So a little background about myself. I'm an application engineer here at KETIV. I've been here for a little bit more than a year and a half now. I started into the delivery team where I focus mainly on content creation. So I've worked in programs such as Inventor, PNID, Fusion 360, AutoCAD. I've touched a lot of the Autodesk products already. My main focus though and emphasis is in Inventor, and I do a lot of that Inventor work and Inventor modeling to support our automation team. Recently, I've been transitioning also into automation teams, so I'm learning a little bit about the framework, a little bit about the code in Visual Studios, and a little bit about my background. I went to school at Cal Poly Pomona and graduated with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. So let's go over an overview about what we're going to be talking today. So what is configuration modeling? So configuration modeling is when a single master part consolidates multiple files into that single part right there. So a good way to think about it is in this example, if you have part 1, part 2, and part 3, and they all share similar geometries, share similar parameters, they look kind of the same, what you can do is you can combine all of those into a master part, and it will be driven off of parameters, suppressing and unsuppressing features, and stuff like that. So you could manipulate your parts to look like each other based off a few rules that you write in iLogic. And the way you're going to control how you look at part 1, part 2, or part 3, I'm going to show you guys how to do it, and it's going to be driven by a parameter. So some of the pros of configuration modeling. It's a concise organization of files. So when we do automation projects here at KETIV, customers will tell us hey, we have an assembly that needs 200 plus parts to be put together. And when you hear about it, 200 plus parts, some of you guys might think, oh, that's not that much. That's pretty small compared to what we do. Or some of you guys might be, oh, that's a lot of parts right there. It gets kind of hard to organize 200 parts, especially if you have to make 200 parts for the customer. So wherever we can use configuration modeling, what we'll do is if we can combine 20 parts into one model here, 5 parts into one model there, we can get that load down to 150 different part files instead of 200. Makes organization a little bit easier, makes finding parts faster, and whether you're storing it in Fusion Team, Vault, or your local machine, it can be easily found, and you don't have to struggle to look through all that big part list that you have. So it's also easy to utilize in Inventor API. A lot of the automation team here at KETIV, they prefer some of the parts to be in configurable master parts. And the reason they do that is so if things are the same, they can just say, hey, change length here, change this here, and change that there. And they have a brand new part there instead of having to look through for that specific part and how to place it. Also, I think the biggest pro to this is it's easy to start utilizing iLogic. When I first started using iLogic, this was actually the first thing I've ever done configuration modeling. And at first, I was kind of intimidated doing it. Didn't understand what was happening at first. I was pretty scared to get my feet into it. But then over time, after I'd done just a few configurations, I realized that the language isn't that difficult. So it's nothing to be scared to do. Once you get it the first time, or once you see what's happening, it's pretty self-explanatory, and then you can just keep on doing it. And then you could also figure out, hey, if my model is configurable. And that goes into the next topic, how to know if your models are configurable or good for configuration modeling. So I like to point out right now that sometimes, yes, you think your models are configurable, and that might be the case, but it might not work to your benefit to do configuration modeling. It just depends on your specific workflow at your company. It depends on what you're doing at your company as well. Most of the time, it'll be a good thing to do, but sometimes you just have to double check and see what you're really trying to accomplish at the end. So, like I said earlier, the best way to determine if your models are good for configuration is if they share similar parts geometry. So in this case, in this image right here, I have a box. And if I'm trying to configure this box to be a circle, it wouldn't make any sense to do so because a box is driven by a length, width, and height parameter. And this cylinder right here is driven by radius and height. So if you're trying to get from here to here using configuration modeling, yes, you can do it, but in the long run, it doesn't make sense to do it. So what I'm trying to steer you guys away from is doing something like this and more something like this. So just say you have a box and then you want to get a box with the whole configuration modeling can take care of that. What they can also take care of is if you have extra features. So if you have an inlet and outlet at the top, for example, you can configure that to suppress and unsuppress those features. And the last one right here, you have a box stacked on top of each other. You can also handle that in configuration modeling as well. So where configuration modeling really helps with iLogic is it helps set parameter values. So you could change parameters. So example, length, width, and height, you could change any value of those. You could suppress and unsuppress features. So things that you don't want to see in certain models, but you want to see in other models, you can do that. And you can also set iProperties. So if you name stuff based off of part numbering or part description, you can add those all in using iLogic as well. So right here at the end of the presentation, do we have any questions yet?
I think we're good, but like Justin said before, if you do have any questions during the webinar, go ahead and type them in. I'll go ahead and answer some in the back as well while Justin's continuing the presentation. So go for it, Justin.
All right, sounds good. So now let's go ahead and jump into the Inventor model that we're going to be taking a look at today. So here, this is actually a project that I did a couple months ago where I was tired of the closet that I had and I was ready for a little bit more room for clothes. So I designed this like built-in closet. It's pretty simple to make actually. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through this model and show you guys what we're gonna be talking about today. So for my closet right here, it's consistent of 3 boxes, the box on the very left, the center box, and the box on the very right. And within these boxes, I have the middle box contains drawers. So you see right here, I named some of these features drawer and drawer handle. I have a divider in box 1 to add a little bit rigidity. You're going to see I have another one in box 3 for a little bit more rigidity. And then I have the rails to hang clothes as well. So the reason why I made this model in Inventor was because I wanted to see it visually how it's going to look, because if I try to draw it out on paper, I can't see things in 2D. It makes more sense to me in 3D. So I wanted to see a visual representation, see what I was going to get myself into when I built this. So that's why I did this. And then I did some configuration for this so I can change things around, such as length, width, height, suppress some features here and there. So up here, if I go up to my parameters, I try to get as many things that I knew were changing to be parameter driven. So I knew that my overall length right here of my closet was 65 inches. So I made sure that the overall length of these boxes combined were never going to be over 65 inches. So the more you could be, I guess the best way to say this is you want to make sure that your configuration models, they are driven with as many parameters as possible, but you don't want to have it to the point where you know things aren't going to change. So for example, if I knew the height was never going to change, you would never put a user parameter as height. But in this case, I kind of wanted to change because I didn't know how tall I wanted it. So I had it there. So make sure things that aren't changing, you don't want to make it a user parameter because this can get really crowded very fast. So I have stuff for height, width, the amount of drawers, the drawer heights, the length of each box, and the location of the rails, and then right here, the thickness of the wood. So right now, let's go ahead and start doing some configuration. So right here, if I add numeric, if I go to the drop down on the right, what we want to do is add a text. And what this text is going to be the name of the configuration. So if you're building something based off of size, maybe you'll want to name this size. If you want to name this something else, like what I'm going to name it is configuration, but you want to make sure you name it something relevant to what you're doing. So when you take a look at it, it's not too confusing for you. So now that I have this configuration parameter right here, if I right click on it, we're going to make it a multi-value. And what making multi-value is it's going to make multiple selections that you can choose from within your parameters. So I'm just going to name my 3 configurations for this closet: configuration 1, configuration 2, and the last one, you guessed it, configuration 3. And right here, you're going to see configuration 3. I'm going to add an extra space after the 3. Just keep that on the back burner for now. I'll tell you why that's going to be a big no-no to do. So now that I press OK, you're going to see that I have a drop down for my configuration 1, 2, and 3. So if I select it, you're going to see nothing's happening right now. It's just empty drop down text. So I'm just going to keep it at 1 for now and press done. So now we are officially able to start writing iLogic. So to get to your iLogic browser, I'm in Inventor 2020 right now. If I press this plus sign right here to show tabs, you're going to see it says iLogic. And if I press that, you're going to see it opens up a new model window right here. So if I can go back to my model browser, now I can go to my iLogic browser now. So now if I right click here, I can add a rule. So now you want to name your rule something relevant once again to what you're doing. So right now, for example, I want my rule to build my closet. So I'm just going to name it build. And when you do that, you're going to see your iLogic window pop up, and we could officially start writing iLogic code. So what I found the most useful for configuration model is to do select cases. So for my select case, we're going to name this case whatever the parameter that we are using. So in this case, we're using configuration. So we're going to select case configuration. Now we can select the cases. So we're going to start with the first case, and make sure you put the name of the case in quotations. So it's going to be case configuration 1. So make sure that what you do, that is you have it case sensitive, and make sure you spell everything out correctly. If you make any errors here, your code's not going to run properly. So let me go ahead and tab this over one time for better formatting. And now you can start selecting variables. So here, I know my overall length is not going to change, so I'm not going to add it here. I know my height's going to change. So one thing you could do for to make it easier, you could double tap it, You click on it twice, you're going to see it's going to say height here, but it doesn't bring that equation over, that number, that 82 inches. So right now you could just manually input it. So you could put it as 82, or you could put the units at the end. iLogic understands that as well. But good practice is to always put units behind everything that you do, so it's easier for you to understand what's happening. So it doesn't look just like numbers. It looks more like something that's comprehensible. Another way you could do it is if I right click on width, I can capture the statement and it's going to bring in the whole thing. So that's going to be your best bet. And you're going to see that the formatting is a little off. We'll go ahead and fix that at the end. Cool, so now I have all the variables that I want to change within my model. So go ahead and highlight all of those. And if you want to format that really quick, you can go ahead and press tab and it's going to be all aligned. So technically now this is pretty much the end of our first configuration. So I could do end select here and it's going to end our select case. So here's configuration 1. And now if we want to write our second configuration, what I'll do is I'll copy this whole configuration right here. Then underneath, go ahead and paste that. So now we have configuration 1, and we have configuration, if I change that to 2, now we have 2 configurations. So in the first configuration, we have everything as the default, the way it looks exactly right now. So let's say in configuration 2, something we wanted to change was height. It wasn't tall enough for us. So we're going to change it to 100 inches. Now you can just input values, whatever you want. Let's say I want more drawers. My box 1, I want this one to be bigger. And then now my box 3 is going to calculate to be the remainder of these 2. Let's just say that instead of 3/8 wood, we're going to go for a 1/4 inch. And then everything else, I like the way it looks. So if we go ahead and press save and run, you're going to see your rule is built here now. If I go up to my parameters, if I'm on configuration 1, this is what it looks like. If I jump over to configuration 2, you're going to see my model has changed now. You're going to see box 1 got bigger. We have more drawers. The overall height is taller. And that's pretty much everything that we've changed. You can see the wood's a little bit thinner. So if I go ahead and measure that for you guys, it should be a 1/4 inch now. So if you guys want to see what happens, we haven't wrote anything for configuration 3, but if we go ahead and select it, nothing's going to happen. And you're going to see that it's not going to break in Inventor either. It just doesn't understand. It doesn't see any value inputted for configuration 3, so it's not going to do anything. Cool, so let's just say right now, if I am in configuration 2, and let's say in this configuration right here, I don't want this box 3 divide. So if I go over to my model, I don't want this box 3 divide here. And I also don't want this box 3 bottom rail. So let's go ahead and suppress that for this right here. So we go over to our iLogic and to our build, and we right click it and we press edit rule. In configuration 2, let's go to those features that we want to get rid of. So for box 3 divide, we said we don't want that in our configuration. If we right click it, we can capture that current statement. And when you click that, you're going to see it comes with all the dimensions. But the only thing that we're really interested in is this right here. This feature is active. So go ahead and delete everything but that. And I'm going to format it right now, so make it look a little bit nicer. So what this feature is active is doing is that it's taking whatever feature that you selected. So in this case, we selected box 3 divide, and it's equal to true. What true means is that it's going to be unsuppressed. So if you put false in this case, it's going to be suppressed. So we wanted to do the same thing with the box 3 bottom rail. So if I right click that again, do the same thing, get rid of all these variables associated with it. And we just want to keep this line right here. And we want to make sure that this item is suppressed as well. So we're going to make it false. So save and run. And you're going to see that right now we are in configuration 2, and those 2 features are done. They're gone, they're suppressed. So if we go over to our model browser, you're going to see down here that they are suppressed. So now if I switch back to configuration 1, you would think they're going to be there. But now in configuration 1, you're going to see that they are still suppressed. So what's the reason for that? If we go back to our iLogic right here, we're going to fix our rule a little bit. So for iLogic, whenever you're doing suppression and unsuppression of features, whatever you use in one case, you have to make sure you carry through all the cases. So we copy and paste these right here into configuration 1. And let's go ahead and format that real quick. We want to make sure that they're true here because we don't want them to turn off in this case. So here in configuration 1, these 2 features are going to be unsuppressed. And in case 2, these 2 features are going to be suppressed. So if we save and run, in configuration 1, if I press that, you're going to see everything is there. If I go to configuration 2, my parameters are going to change as well as those features are going to be suppressed. So let's go ahead and write our last configuration right here so we can see all 3 configurations working. So again, what I'll do is I'll copy and paste one of the cases. Make sure I rename that to have it as 3. And let's say now 100 inches was too tall and we want it shorter than the other one. So let's say we want it at 70 inches. The width was okay. Let's go ahead and cut it back down to 4 drawers. Let's say I want box 1 at 18 inches. And let's say instead of a 1/4 inch wood, we want 1/2 inch wood. And everything else, it was fine. So if we go ahead and save and run now, go over to our parameters, you can see configuration 1 is right there. Press on configuration 2, you're going to see it change. And if we press on configuration 3, you're going to see no changes have been made. So if I go from 1 to 3, nothing happens. If I go from 2 to 3, you're going to see nothing happens again. So remember at the very beginning when I told you that in our parameters, we added an extra space to the end of 3. So if I go over to my build and edit rule, I'm going to have to add that extra space to the back of 3 because I said everything in this quotations right here is case sensitive. So if you don't have it case sensitive, you're going to see that your configuration isn't working. And I ran into that a couple times myself, unrealizing that here I added an extra space and I couldn't figure out why my configuration wasn't working. So now if I go from 1 to 2, and then I go from 2 to 3, you're going to see the model is working now. So that's one way to do it, but better practice is if you switch your parameters. I'll edit it. I'll just get rid of this right here. So if I delete that one, I'm going to add it back again without the space. Go ahead and press add. Okay. So now if you want to test it, you're going to see it's not working again. So go back into your build. You're going to edit your rule. Go down to configuration 3. Make sure you take off that space. And if you run it, you're going to see it work perfectly again. All right. So last thing we're going to do is actually we're going to break our model. And you're going to ask, why are we going to do that? I know, for example, if I put in 1 drawer, this model is not going to like it. So I save and run. If I go from configuration 2 to configuration 3, oh, we have an error. We're going to accept our error. And you're going to see here that this shelf for box 2 ended up in box 3. So one of the biggest things when you're doing configuration modeling, you want to make sure things are constrained correctly. You don't want to constrain it to features that are going to be suppressed or unsuppressed because that way you're going to throw errors. So if I go over to my sketch, you're going to see here I constrained something wrong. So it flipped the sketch actually, and then it put it in a weird place. So in order to fix that, what I'll do is I'll delete whatever I constrained it to and reconstrain it to the correct location to make sure that it shows correctly. So another tip that we're going to go over is actually, I just thought of this off the top of my head. Just say we don't want any drawers. So let's say let's go ahead and fix configuration 3. Let's have it so it's working again. Let's just say if we edit our rule and let's say, hey, I don't want any drawers in my closet. So if I put 0 here and I save and run and I go to configuration 3, you're going to see it runs into another error. And you still see I have that drawer there. So in my rectangular pattern that I had there, it doesn't like it when you input 0 because it doesn't understand what's actually happening. So if you don't want drawers, the best way to do that is if you edit your rule. Instead of putting 0 drawers here, just keep however many drawers you want there. So for example, 4. But what you're going to do is you're going to suppress and unsuppress. So if you go ahead and press that drawer feature, get rid of all these variables associated with it. And then also we're going to get the handle because the drawer and the handle goes together. Get rid of all these dimensions, that. And now we're going to format it a little bit better. So if we want to get rid of it in this configuration, make sure you put these two as false. But since we have it here as false, we have to make sure we add it to our other 2 configurations. So when we change between them, they still show up. So make sure they're true here. And then true in the top configuration as well. So if I save and run now, I have to get rid of that shelf as well, actually. But now that you save and run it, you're going to see in configuration 1, there's no shelves. In configuration 1 and 2, they're going to be normal. And in configuration 3, it's going to have no drawers, but it's going to have this random shelf here because I didn't suppress it. All right, that concludes what I have. Is there any questions?
Yeah, you got a couple, Justin. First off, Justin, do you want to open the ANSYS Virtual Academy page real quick too while I go through a couple of these questions? You can
Yeah, let me go
on your
ahead.
other screen. Cool. All right, so let's go through a couple of these questions first and foremost. First is from Edward. What is the best way to give each configuration a unique part number that's usable in bill of materials? So Edward, probably need a little bit of background on that. One way, you can just have Vault do it, right, and give it unique part numbers when it goes in. Another way to do that is to be able to use some of the iProperties in Inventor. So you could have the configuration write information to the properties in Inventor, which could then in turn write stuff to the part number property as well. So there's a couple.
So I could actually show that real quick. If I go ahead into my rule, edit the rule, over here on the very left, you're going to see that there are some features within iLogic that says, hey, we can start doing stuff. So for iProperties, if you want to double click on part numbering, up here, it's going to pop up right here. Let me go ahead and copy that and put that somewhere else. So let's say in configuration 1, just right at the very top, you have iProperties. So you can put your part number here and then the project that you're working on. So you can automatically insert that and it will automatically populate your iProperties field.
Yep, or you could do a couple other things within the iProperties itself. If you want to write that to maybe not the part number itself and you want to write that to something like description, and then have that information go to the property for part number, things along those lines. You can do a lot of manipulation with the iProperties to be able to get exactly what you want on the end.
Exactly.
Rodney asks, does this work for tanks with fittings in different locations, and how would you locate the fittings around the radius of the tank? So it gets a little more complicated than what Justin showed today. You can totally do that. You can use work points if you want. Sometimes you can use suppression of, you can use like what Justin showed with the suppression of certain components to be able to locate, suppress and unsuppress the locations of the components, and then do a switcheroo of whatever those components are, depending on the situation you want. It can get very, very complex, and you can do a lot of things with the configuration.
Yes, sir.
So as long as you can locate the point where you want to put it, you can utilize some of the logic on the back end to be able to move things around. What's the benefit of using configuration modeling versus making iParts? One, if you're using Vault, iParts and iAssemblies get super confusing, especially when you need to move stuff around. Like just
also,
at the beginning. Yeah, go ahead.
So also, if you're trying to use iPart and you're trying to do Inventor API, so you're trying to do some coding in Visual Studios, for example, it becomes also really, really difficult. Most of the automation team here at KETIV, they prefer having this compared to iParts.
I think everyone on our team prefers this to iParts, actually. If I have customers trying to do this kind of stuff, I steer them this way towards iParts. I know that iParts has been something that's been in Inventor for quite a long time. It does have some of its benefits, but in the case here, I think this is a lot more powerful. You have a lot more flexibility. And if you plan on automating your assemblies, I would just start here so you don't have to do work twice. All the configurations are hard-coded. It would be nice to have the configuration managed by, for example, Excel. You can totally do that. You utilize some different techniques than this. You drive the model from Excel.
Yep.
And you use some other techniques to be able to connect the Excel spreadsheet to this. You use the API to do that. And Visual Studio is probably the better way. I think it's the only way.
No, you could write some iLogic to link Excel sheets to your parts. It takes a little bit more work. If that's something you'd like to see, go ahead and put that in the survey at the end.
Eric actually did an AVA on that maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So there is some content on that on our YouTube channel. Go ahead and take a look. But you could totally have it managed by Excel. If it's a lot easier to do it in Excel if you already have the configurations tabletized. If you've already tabletized all of the options for your components in an Excel spreadsheet, it's a lot easier than what Justin did today, and he wrote up all the configurations. You can just connect the Excel spreadsheet to here and then use the information you already have, right? You've already tabletized it in Excel and just push it through here.
I think also if you're trying to use an Excel sheet, you can't do the function of suppressing and unsuppressing features. You can only drive parameters in that and material.
All right. Let's see. How do you handle adding features to achieve structural validity? You just suppress and unsuppress certain components, I would assume, to do that, Paul. That would be the best way. There are some ways to use some of the automation in analysis tools, specifically Nastran. We did an AVA on that, and so if you want to be able to use some of the automation techniques and then also have those things get automatically, not automatically, but with some configuration get analyzed, we'd have an AVA for that kind of information too.
I see a question here that I actually want to tackle, Nigel, from Gerard.
Yeah,
what about configuration of assemblies? Mostly when we do configuration of assemblies, we don't use iLogic for that, actually. We use Visual Studios. We use Inventor API to take care of that. It's a little bit more difficult to do it with iLogic because iLogic is great at a part level. Doesn't work too great at an assembly level.
Yeah, I think that's when you start hitting some of the barriers of what iLogic can do for you, and you have to start utilizing the API to be able to do that. So yeah, if you're looking at doing assemblies and you're looking at going towards drawing automation and stuff too, you're going to want to start learning some of the API. That's definitely the next step after what Justin has showed today.
So from Edward, best practices for configurable models dash assemblies. Best thing to do, let me go ahead and press answer that live. best thing to do is make sure that you're driving everything off of a specific point. You don't want your model jumping around from like quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. You want to, like, what I like to do is I like to build everything based off the origin and then constrain off the origin. So when you start placing these into assemblies using Inventor API, the model doesn't end up in a weird location.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to model everything to it might sound super weird starting to build your model in space at like 100 inches and 135 inches in quadrant 1. But it makes a ton of sense when you start putting these things together, especially once you use the API to place all of these components in your assemblies and then choose the configurations, all of that stuff.
Exactly. Your best bet is just going to be being consistent with what you're doing. If everything's based off the origin, do everything based off the origin. If
Absolutely.
one part has to be 100 inches off the origin, make all those parts 100 inches off the origin. Consistency is going to help you out a lot when you're placing stuff into assemblies.
Yep. Yeah. And so there's a lot of questions about what do I do with assemblies? What do I do with assemblies? You start using the API at that point. If you want to put a bunch of these configurations in one thing, you're going to want to start utilizing the API. If you're in the Inventor beta program as well, there's some information in there. I can't talk specifics. If you're interested in stuff like this, take a look at the Inventor beta program. I know my friends at Autodesk are going to be happy I mentioned that. I can't say specifically what's there because of information from there, but definitely take a look. So what Justin just pulled up right now is another set of webinars that we're doing. KETIV AVA. If you don't know already, KETIV is also in addition to being an Autodesk partner, we are also an ANSYS partner as well to provide, our customers with the best solutions, whether they be on the CAD side from Autodesk, whether they be on the analysis side from our friends at ANSYS. We're also starting to do some AVAs for ANSYS. So if you go to ketiv.com, /academy, you'll be able to see another page for ANSYS Virtual Academy with information about some of these sessions, which are happening every other Tuesday. You sign up like you do for AVA, you get a different set of emails to remind you to go to ANSYS Virtual Academy if that's something you're interested in. So definitely take a look at that. Additionally, the next couple of AVAs have to deal with 2021 products. As you probably saw in your emails, if you're contract managers, 2021 products have slowly been releasing, and we're going to be having, like we do every year, the Autodesk product managers for Inventor, Vault, and AutoCAD jump on in 3 consecutive weeks to be able to go over what's new in those applications. So definitely stay tuned. This is probably the hottest AVAs of the year, not weather-wise, but in terms of the most exciting content. I really like them. They're some of my favorites, so don't miss those. And so there's a couple more questions I definitely want to address before we let everybody go here. What's the best way to learn how to use the Inventor API? Justin, there are books.
There are books. One of the books that actually I bought was Visual Studios for Dummies. It's a huge book. It's like 1,000 pages. I haven't read the whole book yet, but it's a great way to learn stuff. Also, if you go onto this websites that teach you the different functions of API, and I think that's all Microsoft sites that have they teach you how to use it. They teach you the structure of code for Visual Studios at least, and that would be your best bet right there.
Absolutely, and we've done a lot of webinars for API. A lot of people say that there's a really big barrier to entry on API, and I would say the first couple hours that you're learning it, it's gonna suck.
Yeah.
But once you establish those, I guess, once you establish that workflow from the beginning and start understanding the language and how everything works, it gets a lot easier after that, because it's all the same over and over again. It's just getting to that point.
Yeah, for API, I like to say learning is exponential on this. It's going to start off pretty slow, but once you get it, you're going to take off really fast with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've taught a lot of people, and it looks like Andy said the same thing, right? API seems difficult to start, but it gets easier the more you use it. And like Justin said, it's exponential. Once you start building a foundation, that foundation makes it so much faster to learn everything else. So yeah, that book, I've actually looked at that book myself. What is it, Visual Studio for Dummies?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a slow read at first, but it gets good. I promise you.
absolutely. Cool. And so I think that's everything for questions. I'll let everybody go ahead and ask more questions for the next 30 seconds or so um, while going over some of this stuff. So again, just want to recap what we went over today, right? Justin showed some configurations in Inventor using iLogic. Um, and so iLogic is one of the tools you can use within Inventor, Inventor Pro specifically, to automate processes and make your life a lot easier. And so some of the benefits of using some of the configurations is everything remains in one part file. You have a lot of control over the parameters in your assemblies, or not your assemblies, your configuration itself. And that brings it back to, I think, what is the biggest building block for all of automation? And I think the biggest building block for automation is parameters. If you don't use parameters, there is no way you'll be able to do a lot of this stuff. So I suggest if you are utilizing Inventor now and you're not using parameters, you definitely take a look at how to go ahead and do that, because the backbone of all of this is just manipulating all of those parameters in the back end. Whether that parameter be a dimension of a component, a dimension of a constraint, or things along those lines as well.
All right, so here at Nigel, I see a question from Jeffrey coming in. So he asked, when using iLogic parts with assemblies in the API, is it useful to insert them as iLogic assemblies, or would you recommend doing something different? So here on our team, what we like to do is if we write iLogic at a part level and you want the assembly level to understand it as well, you write another code that imports the iLogic that you have at the part level, and it'll understand it at the assembly level. That's what we do, and that's what we tend to do 99% of the time, and that's always gave us a lot of success.
Yep, absolutely. And so, yeah, hopefully this webinar helped a lot of people. We have a ton of content related to automation, iLogic, whether it's from the model or the drawing or assemblies or all of that stuff on our YouTube channel. So that's going to be youtube.com/KETIV Technologies. If you want to take a look, I know a lot of people who have been on this webinar now have been on a bunch of those. I've seen your names over and over again. So definitely glad we could put some stuff together like this for the community to be able to understand and leverage some of the technology better. If you have any more questions, definitely shoot them our way. You can go ahead and send me an email. Go ahead and send Lifeline an email as well if you have any questions about how any of this stuff works. Again, Justin, I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning. I know it's a little bit of a crazy situation with all of us working from home. And definitely everyone stay safe out there. Anything to add, Justin, before I let everybody go?
Yeah, I think we got a ping that we got a question on YouTube actually. So let me go ahead and read this. In Inventor 2021, there is an option to place an iLogic component. Can you please give a brief on that? So
Okay, I can
Inventor
answer that
2021.
question. Yeah, so come to the AVA in 2 weeks. Lauren Welch will show that, and Gavin, Garen and Lauren will be able to show that on the webinar, and definitely take a look at what that is. So we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
All right, bye everyone, stay safe.